This is the MixCoach Podcast, episode number 115. So, Jon and I were on the phone talking about some of the crazy stuff we've done to mixes over the years. So, I decided to record it for the podcast. Now, I'll be the first to say that the quality of this recording is not quite as good as I had hoped. We recorded a phone conversation, and it has a few dropouts, and the tone of it's not great, but everything is understandable, and I wanted to go ahead and post it because there's some information in here that may be useful, and it may help you with ideas when it comes to a mix that you're feeling that just needs something, but you don't know what to do with it. So check out episode number 115.
So the other day, you and I were on I guess it was a Skype call, or it was maybe a webinar with the pro members, and you were sitting down to record some box on a bluegrass track. And what I mean by box is you had some brushes, and you were pulling up a little cardboard box to record some brushes, like a snare kind of a thing.
Yeah.
So I thought we'd talk today about kind of some of the crazy instruments that we use, and some of the wild things that both you and I have done, on mixes, and talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, okay. Cool. Yeah, I was recording a bluegrass record the other day, or mixing one actually, and I was adding percussion to it, and you can't call it a snare because it was literally a pizza box.
Yeah.
I bought a set of brushes, just the wire brushes that the jazz guys use, and it was just enough to give it a little backbeat and a little swing, and so a snare, because when you play a snare on a song like that that's really light and kind of choppy, sometimes you don't get the snare anyway. You just get You never hit the drum hard enough for the snare to vibrate on the bottom head.
Yeah.
So a lot of times it's just the top head. So, and sometimes, I've heard stories from some old country guys where they used to play an Ampex 456 box with brushes. And so I figured,
That's awesome.
I didn't have a 456 box at the time, so I just used a pizza box, which I did have, which we won't talk about, why there was a pizza box sitting around. But anyway, yeah,
that's awesome.
It's fun, and it works. It works.
I've done the pizza box with brushes before. I definitely have it. In fact, like I always with a lot of my mixes, I add loops and a lot of percussion stuff to things. A lot of times that's why people come to me to have me mix things. And so I've done the pizza box thing, and in fact, I've tested out multiple types of pizza boxes, believe it or not. So there was a time whenever I needed some brushes on a couple of tracks, and there was a percussionist buddy of mine. I was like, come on over, and we're just going to record a loop. And so I had like a Domino's pizza box and a Pizza Hut pizza box. Like, I had been saving up for like weeks because I was like, I know that this is going to happen. I knew this was coming down the line, and I would want to add this. And so I was like, let's just try some stuff out and figure out what tone it works best with this song and like what's going on there. It was definitely the Pizza Hut box won out.
So Pizza Hut. So are you a Pizza Hut box snob? You prefer that over Papa John's? Or?
I mean, for sure. I mean, it's one of those things that's like, no, if you're gonna go for the pizza box snare, go with the best. Go with Pizza Hut. They should start doing that on their advertisements.
That's a whole different discussion up there, I think.
They should. They should be like, by the way, you can get some wings for $5 and add that to your pizza, and you get a pizza box snare.
Yeah, then you have people going, hey, I'm a little hungry, and this needs some pizza box on it, so I've got a great idea for catering tonight.
I love it.
Yeah,
I love
Pizza Box works. Pizza Box works great. I've used it several times.
Yeah.
I've also seen this before. There was a song I was recording for a guy named Russ Lee, and I saw the drummer do this, and I thought it was kind of cool. Although I wasn't wild about it on this song, but it actually worked. He actually took a drum head, just a regular, like a snare head, off the drum, and he played that. Of course, the drum head was a head that had tambourine jingles built into it. And he kind of built a percussion loop out of that jingle. I don't know what you call it. It's a snare with jingles built into the top of it. And it was not timed up at all, but it was a cool sound. And you know, I had trouble making it sit in the mix, but I think for what it was great.
It's interesting. Like some of those things, and some of the things that I've done are very song specific. Other times they're not, and like I'm always surprised with a lot of my loops and things that I build, like what actually fits with things, and then what I can manipulate to make it fit with things.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've done things like the same percussionist friend of mine. I used to all the time, like whenever he lived like really close by to me, I used to like just hire him for the day. Be like, yeah, come over. And we'll record a bunch of just random stuff with the loop, and I have the song in mind that some of this is going to go for, and then some stuff in addition to that I would just have on the drive sitting there ready to go. And so like he brought over a saw blade one time. It's a little like 10-inch saw blade, and so we recorded that any number of ways. There was a couple of ways that have worked out really well. With like brush and then just rub it across the top where it's just kind of a shing kind of a sound and it really kind of drawn out, that sort of thing. I've used that quite a lot and manipulated it to where it doesn't even sound like a saw blade. It just kind of sounds like a metallic scrape, which is really kind of cool. The other way that we used the saw blade was we put it on top of a snare, on top of the head of the snare, and then just hit it. And so it's this kind of metallic sounding big gunshot snare sound. And I use that all the time, man.
Yeah, I know that one time I was working on another record, and it was kind of an artsy, jazzy sort of project, and we ended up doing a kind of like the snare thing, but it was actually my return vent in my studio with a set of sticks. I threw a mic up there. Of course, the air conditioner was off, but so we didn't get that the wind noise or anything like that. But he actually played my return vent. And it's fine. Yeah,
that's super cool.
Yeah,
that's super fun, man.
Another couple of things I've done too is I've actually recorded a piece of paper before, like put it in front of a microphone and then just tap it with the fat part of your finger.
Yeah.
Sometimes that's an interesting sound, and I would recommend, how I advocate, or you probably do it too. Just take days that just kind of like express your inner artist, and you just kind of pick out some weird sounds. You maybe mess with the compressor, see which 1176 model you want to go with.
Exactly.
On days like this, sometimes it's just fun just to record an arsenal of sounds. I've actually actually beatboxed and tried to pick some of those sounds out. I mean, I've made
definitely.
That. I would actually and I would use that. And I would actually trigger sounds from my beatboxing to make it sound less beatboxy and more drum machines. Because,
I think that method is really cool too. Whenever you have a song, and like sometimes I'll whenever people hire me to do a mix, a lot of times they'll have me do like a loop and things, and that's a lot of times where it all comes from. Is that I'll get to a point on a mix and get it to where it's like, okay, so it's sitting there, but it's time for me to add things. It's time for the entire concept of like whatever percussion, whatever loops, whatever additional production is going to go into this thing needs to go in. And I'll kind of hit the pause button and maybe move on to some other project or whatever for a minute or a couple hours, or sometimes even like I'll take, I'll get to that point right at the end of a day and then take that evening and think about this, like just mull it over while I'm doing other things, while I'm eating lunch, eating dinner, fixing something, doing the dishes, whatever, and like kind of have the song running in my mind and beatbox and just kind of like try to feel out what type of vibe I want to go with it. And a lot of times it will be a voice memo on my phone while I'm like, standing there walking into a store or whatever. I'm like, and I have the idea. And it's like a beatbox, it's like, I know what this wants this to sound like. So I just pull up the voice memo on the phone, record a few seconds of it. And then that way later on I can go and rebuild that with other samples, whether it's throw a kick in there, throw a snare blade in there, something with a saw blade on top of a snare, whatever samples I have and pull those in and go with that. It's a fun process, man.
Well, when you're programming like that, when you're adding things like that, I think the hardest thing to do sometimes is to make it feel right. And a lot of times it feels right when you do it, in your head or, if you replicate it with your mouth. So we're living in a time right now. I mentioned this the other day on a webinar. We're living in such a time to where, we all act like, and, I've got experience with gear like this, but not extensive experience, like, like a Fairchild, a real Fairchild, a blue stripe 1176, and all the different, I've only worked with one vintage of LA2A, but in the age that we live in now, there's so many plug-in manufacturers that have so perfectly sampled or modeled these compressors, we all know kind of what the characteristics are of each one of them. And the same thing with sounds. We live in such a time to where we can actually throw something down with our mouth or bang it on a table, and literally, you can take two parts of the table and mic each one of them up, and literally with stuff like Massey Dirt or some program like that, you can literally play drums on a table and trigger different sounds with it, and it feels pretty good. It's an amazing time to be a recording engineer and producer.
I think about years and years ago, it was probably super expensive to try out recording a saw blade on a record. It's like you had to book the studio time and the engineer and the tape, and it's like that's a really expensive prospect. Whereas now it's like all you have to have is I've done a pizza pan before, and it's like all you have to have is two pizza pans that have slightly different tones, and now you've got this awesome sound that you can bring into any of your mixes and throw it in a bunch of reverb and all that sort of thing. The funny thing is, about a lot of the tones that I use is, most people might not know that, hell, this is a pizza pan. It's but it sounds like this big, epic kind of metal sheet thing that you hit with a hammer or whatever, so chung! But it's totally a pizza pan that I've affected and changed and bit crushed or whatever it ends up being, where it's okay, can I make this sound what I hear in my head? And then you just tear it up destroy it until you can. And so, the idea of doing that years and years ago, like I said, it's a very expensive prospect, whereas today it's just a matter of time and then know-how, figuring out, okay, so how do I mic, what's the best sound out of this pizza box? And how do I affect this and lay it into my mix to where it'll actually fit? And I think that's something that's worthy of going after. I also think about the fact that nowadays I haven't recorded a bunch of new loops in a really long time, because I have so many at this point where it's I can usually, unless I'm going way out of my wheelhouse or whatever, I can usually make one of the sounds that I actually have today work pretty darn well. It will, I'll be able to tweak it and change it to where it's exactly what I want it to be, whether it's, I can even tune things and bring things up and down, put it on the tonic, put it on the fifth, and all this stuff, it serves a really solid purpose to have a good, solid knowledge base to say, oh, this thing, let me try that pizza box on it. It's that's a really cool idea.
Yeah. And sometimes, and maybe I should leave it at this, sometimes experimenting like that is just what the doctor ordered. A couple of podcasts ago, we talked about keeping things fresh. Sometimes what you need to do is just to experiment, and sometimes that unlocks a piece of your brain that moves you forward on your mix. If you're kind of bored with mixing or bored with a certain song, or maybe you're working on one of your songs that you've heard for a year and you're trying to get it done. If you just can't push yourself to get it finished, sometimes experimenting with it might be just what the doctor ordered. And luckily, I will kind of leave with this. You don't have to have, and maybe this is a topic for another podcast, but I did a clinic in Casper, Wyoming not too long ago where I took two files. I took my acoustic guitar, which is a pretty good acoustic guitar. It's an Alvarez Yari, and it records pretty well. And I had a U47 up in front of it, and then right underneath the U47, I put my iPhone 6, a microphone, and I recorded them the same pass with the mics in approximately the same location. And then I took it to this clinic, and I was doing a keynote presentation. And, of course, it was over the house speakers. It wasn't under the scrutiny of, headphones, but it was pretty close. I asked them, I said, okay, which one of these was recorded with this $4,000 microphone? And which one was recorded with the really expensive piece of equipment called the iPhone 6, which I still pay for every month? And did you know that two people that chose to try my challenge, they both picked the iPhone as being the better phone. A better microphone.
Man, that's amazing.
It is amazing, but it was that close. Now, granted, I know that if we were doing a blind listening test over really good monitors or really good headphones, I think most engineers would probably pick the U47 eventually. But my point is, if you hear a sound that you like, if you want to get a reverb trail from a hallway that you're standing in or whatever, grab your iPhone, experiment with that. You may just find that you come up with a sound that you could have never captured in your studio, because first of all, the sound is not there, and second of all, you have to capture those things while they're fresh on your mind and while you're interested in them, so that you can come back to them.
Definitely. And so don't be scared to run downstairs and grab all your pots and pans and mic them up and start smacking on them. That's so good.
Yeah, take them to the racquetball court and see how they sound.
That's right.